I just want to introduce a few key folks that are here that are taking the time to join us. Former Secretary Jay Ash, who has been very instrumental in this thing in the past under Charlie Baker. Thank you very much for being here. The Deputy Director of Mass Development, Teresa Park, is here. Where are you, Teresa? And Julie Cowan, I have her on speed dial all the time. Thank you very much, Julie, for being here. Our District Attorney, Andrea Harrington, is here. Thank you very much. We have current and former selectmen from the town of Lee, Nelson Daly, David Consolati, Tom Wickham, Sean Rainier, and Bob Jones. Patty Carlina will be speaking in a few minutes. And all the way from Great Barrington, Lee Davis, select person from Great Barrington, and even further, George McGurn from the town of Egremont. So this is a huge project here today. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the former town administrator, Chris Ketchen, and Rich Vanette, who, along with Bob Mason, put together an incredible Mass Works application. And they just completed a $4.9 million water line extension that not only benefits this particular project, but benefits the entire town of Lee. It was the largest MassWorks grant that given year. So Chris Ketchen, Rich Vanette, thank you very much for being here and all the help you put into this thing. I mentioned Bob Mason, who sadly passed away a year or so ago, but his wonderful wife, Lisa Sloan, is here, and his daughter, Sally Nason, who I've known since she was a baby, and now a college graduate working at Brigham and Women's. They're both here. Please stand up, because your husband, your father, Bob Mason, loved the town of Lee. And I remember when I was a selectman in Lenox many, many years ago, I tried to steal Bob away to come to Lenox because we needed a new town manager. And Bob said, no, I really love Lee. I want to stay in Lee, and this is where it's going to happen. I don't think we'd be here today without the work that Bob Mason, his heart and soul. Bob drove 100 miles an hour every time he went on that turnpike. But I remember Dave Consolati and Bob Mason meeting me in Boston in our very first meeting with then Secretary Greg Bielecki under the Deval Patrick administration. So we all go back over 8 years into this project. But Bob, the sun is out now because Bob is shining down on us, saying thank you, this project is long overdue. And I'm so blessed to have Lisa here, who's changed her schedule to be here, and to have Sally come out from Boston to be here, just to say thank you. Your father was a wonderful man, and we're thinking about him very strongly today. And before I turn it over to Jeff Cohen, I want to personally say that I've been involved in this project, this site, for a long time. I've seen a lot of ideas come and go. I've seen a lot of developers come and go, but this one is real. And of all the developers and all the ideas that have come across the table here, this one was fully embraced by the community of Lee. They love the idea. The paper industry in the town of Lee is quite historic. This particular mill dates back to the early 1800s. David Consolati once told me that at one point in time, there was over 4,000 people that worked in the paper mills in the town of Lee alone. Think about that. 4,000 employees of paper mills in the town of Lee alone. There's less than 6,000 people that live here right now. But the paper industry for hundreds of years was a very important aspect of the economy, not only of this community, but of the Berkshires as well. We now have one paper mill left with about 150 employees. But the legacy of the paper industry is critically important, and this development, which would preserve a lot of the history, which dates back to the early 1800s, but also embracing the opportunities as a community, as what I'll call the real gateway to the Berkshires, the town of Lee. Hundreds of thousands of people drive by this site every day, and it's been an eyesore for quite a while. This is an opportunity, and Jeff Cohen's dream and vision, and the tenacity of our elected officials and secretaries and former secretaries, and the community, to weather the storm, not only of COVID. COVID shifted things, it delayed things, but also COVID exposed a lot of things when it comes to housing. Housing insecurity, housing affordability, those things have been highlighted during this COVID pandemic. This is going to be a major step, not only for the community of Lee, but for the Berkshires as a whole, to have a safe, clean, and housing that's affordable. I don't like the phrase affordable housing, but I love housing affordability. this project is going to go a long way to doing just that. So I'm honored to be here to play a very small role, but I'm very proud to turn it over to the man with the vision, the man with the ideas, the man with the patience, a good friend of the community of Lee, Jeff Cohen.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Smitty. I knew if we started with Smitty, the rest of us really wouldn't have to say much. But Smitty is also the one that would have called first for help, and he's always there for us. Congressman Neal, Secretary Galvin, I'm sure would be here. Secretary Keneally, Senator Hines, Chairwoman Carlino, distinguished guests, friends. What a glorious day. It's 9 years later, almost to the day, that we started by putting this property under contract. Thank you for coming to this groundbreaking ceremony for the Eagle Mill. For me, this is a day of Thanksgiving, which is why we scheduled it just before the holiday. As Bobby Kennedy often said, some men see things as they are and ask why. I dream things that never were and say, why not? And so today, we come together to acknowledge that dreams, this one, 9 years in the making, can come true. My partners and I saw the opportunity to transform and revitalize the town of Lee by creating a village of affordable and market rate housing in which people could live and eat and work and enjoy life while recognizing the history and the character of this charming town. Hillary Clinton said, "It takes a village." I think that it takes much more. First, it takes ignorance. So often I've said, if I knew then what I know now, I'm not so sure we'd be here. But ignorance is bliss, and it's of not knowing what the challenges are that you have to overcome. Second, passion. You have to have passion to believe in and create that which you dream. Third, integrity. To pursue your dreams honestly and with transparency, respecting all with whom you come in contact. And we've preached that, and we've tried to do that literally every day that we've been involved with this project. And fourth, perseverance. Never give up. Dodge the bullets as best you can, because success is worth so much more than the sum of its parts. As you can now envision for the Eagle Mill complex and the town of Lee. The Beatles called it a winding road. I call it a very bumpy road, as literally not a day goes by without the challenge of a bump or two. So how do you do it? What's the secret of success? Aside from trying to be ever optimistic, the glass is always half full, and never giving up, I say look around you. Those of you who are here today, literally every person that's in and under this tent and around has participated in some way, shape, or form in bringing this project to success. And that's what's made it successful. For me, it starts with the great fortune of a wonderful, supportive, and loving family. You know, it's always said, don't bring your work home with you, but most of us do, I do. And fortunately, I have a wonderful wife, Beth, who tolerates it and is generally always encouraging and understanding, most of the time. This is somewhat of a family business. My son-in-law, John DeCraker, who some of you have met, is working for DEW and is a project manager handling pre-development and everything else that's necessary. My daughter Jody, who with John just moved here to the Berkshires with their daughters Ava and Zoe. Jody's here taking pictures and helping out. She's also organizing all of us all the time. And my oldest grandson, Asher, flew in from Minnesota, so he was put in charge of parking and cleaning the lot. So we're all here and we're all involved. I'd like to take a minute and just introduce my partners to you. Fred Taverna. Fred, stand up. Don Wells couldn't be here. DEW Construction is Mike Francis and Don Wells. In this building behind me, the machine shop, there's going to be a prepared foods market with pizza, hopefully ice cream, some other good foods, bagels, and that's going to be done in partnership with Dave Renner, Doug Luff, Kevin Schmitz, and Chris Brooks. You guys are all here somewhere, I hope. They're otherwise known as the Marketplace. What I really think about often is that when I first arrived here in January of 2013, I had a meeting, the first meeting ever with the Eagle Mill as its purpose, with Michael Considine, Rich Vanette, and John Philpott. And to this day, each one of them is still involved. Considine tends to represent every party in the transaction sitting at the table, so that's useful. But they're all still involved, and I want to thank each of you for all of that. We've worked closely with the Lee Select Board initially and for many years with Patty Carlino. Tom Wickham and Dave Consolati, I know they wore targets on their backs recently, but if it weren't for you, Tom, and for Dave, we wouldn't be here. And their work on planning boards and otherwise was exceptionally helpful to us. We're looking forward to working with Sean and with Bob, the new select board members, and hopefully we'll have a great relationship with them as well. Chris Ketchum, town manager after Bob, just simply the best, always available, always helpful. Lennox is lucky that they've got him full-time. And as I've said, we worked a lot with the planning board, with the ZBA, with the Conservation Commission, with the Lee Historic Commission. Each one of those commissions never rolled over and said, we'll give you what you want, but were very willing to work with us in an open way, and it resulted in the design and development of a much better project. There are so many members of our development team who are here, probably more than 50, each of whom has contributed to our success. I'd like to take a moment, personal privilege, if you will, and just specifically acknowledge, as Smitty did, Bob Nason. What a wonderful man to work with. No more ethical person on the planet, no more honest person on the planet, no more hardworking. And again, Bob is like a mentor and shepherded us along the way. So I miss him, I think about him. What a great guy. Chief Jeff Russa. We had a town meeting, many of you will remember, up at the high school, I think it was. And the issue of affordable housing came up. And there were some people in the audience who weren't particularly, let's say they weren't as aware of what affordable housing was. So they weren't looking forward to it. But Chief Russa stood up and said, people, this is for those of us who can't afford expensive housing. We need it for our police, for our firefighters, for our teachers. And he stood up when it wasn't necessarily the most popular thing to do. And I remember Jeff Russa for that, and also for me being a wannabe policeman, talking to him all the time about helping out and getting involved. So I miss him too. One of the, I guess, most important and memorable experience for me since being in Lee has been sitting at the counter over at Joe's Diner with Joe. And I looked forward in the afternoons because generally I'd call Mike Sorrentino and say, where's your dad? And usually he was down at the diner ignoring his diabetes, having cake and pie and whatnot. So I spent a lot of time, as often as I could, sitting with Joe, learning about the history of Lee, learning stories about people in Lee. It was wonderful afternoons well spent. I miss Joe, and I want to just be sure we all remember him. This type of development, large real estate, takes a lot of cash, a lot of capital to pull off. And you need the money when you don't have it at the beginning of time. So I want to be sure to acknowledge Charlie O'Brien and his team at Adams Community Bank, which were there to help us when no one else was, to finance the acquisition of all these houses on West Center Street. And Chuck Leach and the team at Lee Bank, which helped us acquire properties on West Center Street. Both of those banks have been wonderful to work with, focused on the community, not necessarily bigger picture stuff, but on the community, and that's been very helpful. Mass Development has been wonderful to work with. Cindy Tanucci, Brandon, I know you've graduated from Mass Development to Mass Capital, but Brandon and of all Julie Cowan, who shepherded everything through for us, saved us, and will save us again with Brandon and Mass Capital on the next loan that we need. So Julie, thank you so much. One other short personal story. Many years ago, I got a call from the community development officer in Adams, who said, the Secretary of Housing and Community Development is going to be up here touring your building. Why don't you come up and meet him? So I said, sure. I went up to Adams and I met Secretary Ash, and he's 6'8", so you got to look up. And so I shook hands. I said, I understand you're from Chelsea. And he said, yeah, I was the town manager at Chelsea, and I got a 5-minute history of his experiences in Chelsea. What we learned subsequent to that was that Jay's family grew up at 64 Cottage Avenue in Chelsea, and my family, my grandmother, my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandparents grew up at 10 Cottage Ave in Chelsea. So the family, I wouldn't call it a relationship, but the families grew up on the same street a very long time ago. And I would say that changed the relationship from, sort of grubby developer and state official to at least two people. Right. It changed it, and our relationship has gone from a professional one to one of personal friendship, which I highly value. But it was this Baker-Polito administration, no administrations before that, but it was the Baker-Polito administration, Secretary Ash, that provided the $5 million through Mass Works to pay for the water line replacement that put the Eagle Mill project on the map. That's what gave us credibility. That's what got us started. And then finally, but most importantly, Congressman Neal, you've said to me many times, if there's anything we can do, call. And yes, we've called. And if it's not the congressman, you get Billy Powers. And between the two of them, we wouldn't be here with tax credits. It weren't for them and their relationship with Secretary Galvin and all other good things to come from a congressman's office who's chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. It doesn't hurt. Secretary Galvin, I'm sure, will be here. He's the man responsible for tax credits in Massachusetts. Without them, projects like this don't happen. So Congressman Galvin, essential to the process. I want to save Secretary Keneally for last, but Senator Hines, Adam, and of course Smitty, from day one have always been there and said, you're in our district, we'll be there to help you. They've been more than responsive. They answer the phone, they call you back. That's incredibly valuable. So, as I said, it's more than a village. It's everybody in the room that's enabled us to get where we are. Secretary Keneally took Secretary Ash's place. And it was under Secretary Keneally that Reese Larkin and Berkshire Housing got funded, which enabled the construction and development of the Phase 1 housing. If it weren't for Secretary Keneally's, I would say, championing our project, hopefully now and in the future. Again, we wouldn't be here. And so many of the organizations under Secretary Keneally's jurisdiction touch what we do. So it is so important that the Baker-Polito administration has taken notice of us and that Secretary Keneally has supported us. So I want to be sure to thank you in the future from the road. Last but not least, I want to mention not our partners, but they are really John Rosinski and Eileen Pelletier, now president and CEO of Berkshire Housing. They're over here. What we're doing at the mill is we're selling the historic buildings and 2 sites to be developed as housing, and we're selling them to John and Eileen. I'm not a housing developer. I don't pretend to be. It's such a highly technical business. You really need to know what you're doing. More importantly, you need to have a good reputation, and you need to have the respect of those that you work with. Thank goodness they do. And if it weren't for them, again, we wouldn't be here. But they're developing all of our housing. Phase 1 starts soon. The last I would say by way of explanation is we'd hope to actually put a shovel in the ground, which we will do later, but to start construction. We've been at this, as you know, 9 years. We have one more letter to receive from DHCD, which is an environmental funding approval. And with that, right? With that, you'll see the houses start to go away. We're kind of hoping that'll happen in the next few months. And demolition, abatement, remediation for the mill will actually physically begin shortly. So again, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, more importantly, for participating with us over the years. It's because of you that we're here. I'd like to call on Congressman Neal for his remarks, please.
So first, congratulations to you, Jeff, and to the development team. Risk-taking is still a very important part of the American economy. What you're willing to put on the table, with no guarantee of what the return is a huge gamble. So time and again, against long odds, as we went back and forth, you have helped to bring us to this day, and to be with Smitty and Senator Hines and Secretary Keneally, as well as to the members of the Board of Selectmen here and local officials. I have a history. I came out of local government. 5 years in the mayor's office, 6 years on the city council, and then 5 years as mayor of Springfield. Once I got to Congress, the one thing I meticulously avoided was giving advice to local officials on land use. Local officials determine land use. And I think that this is indicative of what we're witnessing today. There are few issues that are more difficult than the nature of housing. It's largely based upon what we call income elasticity. Sounds complicated on the surface, very basic on the inside. So when Jeff approached me, and my staff went back and got the date, the first time that we spoke was on July 3rd of 2016, and he needed help with the National Park Service, because the National Park Service is the custodian of many of these historic buildings across the country. And they do a great job. So little by little, we had to assemble the site to make it attractive to investment dollars. And as that happened, Bill Powers in my office did a great job on this. In these subsequent meetings, we convinced the Park Service that the project was not only worthwhile, but over a long view would be a sizable investment in the town of Lee. I get this remarkable chance in Congress to oversee part of the nation's tax code. And one of the parts of the tax code, I'm going to describe it for you in technical terms, but it's not really that technical when you have a chance to ponder it. It's called a tax expenditure. And that's how you use the tax code to make an investment. And all it really means is, but for that tax credit, that's money that previously would have gone to the federal treasury. Instead, the idea is to address what we call gap financing. It means that whether we talk about how much we all love these communities, there generally is still a gap in trying to take buildings that have been abandoned for decades and bring them back to life where they might produce tax support. So when Jeff approached us about this initiative, I talked to Bill Galvin. And one of the advantages I have with Bill Galvin, I think by the way, he kept saying he's coming. He lives in Brighton, so he probably started out yesterday on his way here. But one of the advantages of having had these long relationships like I've had with Bill Galvin, who by the way has been a terrific advocate of the history of these buildings across the state of Massachusetts, I said, I think this project makes a lot of sense. I said, the community's behind it, Rep and the Senator, they're behind it. Why don't we give it a go? And he assembled the tax credits after the request from Jeff. And then HUD had a handsome contribution that they made. We went back and did a tabulation. We believe in total it's about $16 million. But the following is essential to understand. To bring these buildings back to life, to make them income producing for tax revenue purposes, you still need some governmental assistance, because it's just not going to have, the economics just don't work without that government assistance. So I want to thank the team here that's assembled today, remind people of it's your community. You know, we have this tendency to watch news or turn pages, for generations of myself and others, of papers and say, well, you know, Washington must be the center of what goes on in America, or Boston's the center of what goes on in America. No, the great decisions come right here with people like you, friends and family and churches and synagogues, and in our public governance. It's folks like you who made this happen, and I really appreciate it as I close, Jeff, being a generation who was quite fond of the Beatles. When you mentioned metaphorically the long and winding road, and you mentioned the bumps in the road, I appreciated that metaphor. You know why? Because after that great transportation bill that we passed on Friday night, you're not going to have to worry about that anymore.
Well, thank you, Congressman. It's just so rewarding to have such a nice relationship with you and your office, and I appreciate it. Secretary Keneally is the Secretary of Housing and Community Development for the state of Massachusetts. Controls so much of our lives here at the Eagle Mill, and we're looking forward to ongoing great relationships with your office, Secretary. I would like to call on you to say a few words.
Jeff, thank you. It is great to be here with you and your team, the congressman, the senator, the representative, the folks from Lee. It's a great day for Lee. It's a great day for Massachusetts. And I got to say, I've got this amazing job where I spend so much of my time traveling the Commonwealth. And I've got 5 stops in Western Mass today. We recently did 25 downtowns over the summer and fall. We just wrapped up a 6-day, 12 community tour of affordable housing. And you get out there now and you just get this renewed sense of just optimism and resilience that we're getting things done, right? And the way we get things done in this state is we do them together. And you think about the people, and a number of people made this point already today, that the level of collaboration it takes to get important projects done. I've been saying for a long time that affordable housing is like the ultimate team sport. It requires, federal government, state government, local government, visionary developers, and it's a complicated mix of financing and tools to get these things done. It's inspiring to see. And when I go out and visit these projects, we see them in all phases of development, groundbreakings and ribbon cuttings, existing projects, and they're all different. They're all different shapes and sizes, different populations, different communities, but they all start with a site or a building and a developer and a vision about how housing can be created that will improve people's lives and enrich their communities. So it's really among the most fun and interesting parts of my job is getting out here and seeing the work. And we talk about collaboration from our administration. I want to mention the folks at DHCD, Kate Racer, who runs our affordable housing division. Mass Development, Teresa Park is here, and Julie Cowan and others. They do a great job. Mass Housing will be involved here. The MassWorks grant, thanks to my predecessor and friend for writing the check on that one. Very, very important part of the project. But that is how we as an administration come together and support developers and support our communities to get this work done. Let me say a word about housing. I use this term a lot. The governor does as well. We've been in the middle of a housing crisis now for a generation in Massachusetts. We simply need a lot more housing. In the last 30 years, we've produced about half the amount of housing we produced in the prior 30 years. And it impacts our households, our communities, our business competitiveness. And I always say, if you want to summarize the Baker-Polito housing strategy in one word, that word would be more. And it's more of everything, more types of housing everywhere, affordable, workforce, market rate, Western Mass, Central Mass, Eastern Mass, all over the place. And that's why this work is so important. That's why we've paid so much attention to it and get out and see the work and work so closely with a variety of people to make these projects happen. This is a big deal. It's a really, really big deal. And it's great to be here to recognize it. I will just close on one point and say that what would help us do more is more money. And we have now a proposal before the legislature to spend $1 billion for federal ARPA funds on housing. I think it's critically important to get that one done because, again, we are in a crisis. We have the people, we have the programs, we have the tools, and with more funding, we can get a lot more done. So it is really great to be here. It's great to be back on the road and seeing this really impressive work. And like I said, it's a big deal for Lee, it's a big deal for the state. And congratulations, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm looking forward to more visits. As I said earlier, I'm not a housing developer. John Rosinski is, Eileen is, and I'd like to ask them to say a few words about their housing development here at Eagle Mill.
Thank you, Jeff. So Berkshire Housing and Reese Larkin Development, we will be jointly doing the Phase 1 residential 56 mixed income units. We're very excited about it, and we hope to do 2 later phases in the development. Normally I would get up here and thank a bunch of individuals. I'm not going to do that, mainly because they've all been thanked already, and it's cold. So, but I am going to thank institutions and programs briefly, even if some of them have already been mentioned, because it's really important. The town of Lee, the town doesn't know me that well, and that's because we have Jeff, who's been the face of this project for 9 years. But I know what the town has done, and it's unbelievably important. The various ways the town has been proactive in addressing this mill complex. It started with a study that was done several years ago. It went on to the MassWorks grant that's already been mentioned. That the town had to apply for that grant and make it happen. Then came the Smart Growth Overlay District Ordinance, so the town passed. That's a state law, the 40R law. Very important for developers because they provide certainty for developers. The town was proactive in passing that ordinance. And finally, they provided financial support. So the town of Lee deserves all the plaudits that it has received up here. But on the programmatic side, this is not a political statement in any way. I want it to come off as an economic statement. Developments like this cannot happen without support from the federal and state government, financial support. And I don't mean a little bit, I mean a massive amount of support. And I'm not ashamed to say that. That's what it takes to get these developments done. And the various programs, the federal historic tax credits, the state historic tax credits, which Secretary Galvin oversees, are very important. Mass Housing has been mentioned. They're going to provide workforce housing funds that are very important. By far the biggest provider would be Massachusetts DHCD, and Secretary Keneally ultimately is in charge of that agency as well. They provide the affordable housing tax credits and scads of other programs that will go directly into this building. And I guess I'll just leave with some numbers. The give or take a few dollars, the main mill building here, which will be the Phase 1 residential, is going to cost about $26 million, $26.4 million. That's a lot of money. And you might ask, well, okay, so the government provides a little bit of help for that to get us over the top. And I guess, so I asked you, how much of these government subsidy programs, what percentage of it does the government provide to make this $26 million project possible? Someone might say 10, 20, 30%. The answer is $23 million. It's 88% of the capital for this building comes from these programs, and it would not be possible. That's a dumb statement to say it would not be possible without it, but I'll say it. It will not be possible without those programs. So I urge everyone to continue to support all of those programs, and I'll let Eileen finish this.
Thanks, John. Good morning, everyone. So again, my name is Eileen Peltier, and I'm actually the new CEO of Berkshire Housing. I've only been back in Massachusetts after growing up in Worcester, Mass. For about 6 months. So on behalf of Berkshire Housing, I'm really happy to be here today to celebrate this wonderful project and the many partners who have come together to make it happen. At Berkshire Housing, our purpose is to find solutions to housing and to harness the power of community. This coalition of town, state, and federal officials, along with the private, community-minded developers, is a great example of just that. This site has a long history of benefiting the community. Today, we launch a new beginning that not only will bring new life to a long vacant site in the heart of Lee, but importantly, will provide desperately needed housing. The situation is daunting. In Berkshire County, as well as the rest of the state, we have a serious supply issue, combined with too many households making too little to afford a home. About 1/3 of Berkshire County households make less than $35,000 a year. We also know that many families who earn up to 80% of the area median income, also called AMI, or around $58,000 for a family of 2, struggle to afford housing. Eagle Mill's first residential phase will be a mixed income project. It will provide 36 apartments for extremely low and low income residents earning no more than 60% AMI, as well as 20 more apartments for those earning up to 80% area median income. In our work, Berkshire Housing has seen many hardworking families just over that 60% AMI threshold lose out on an opportunity to have a home. With Eagle Mill's mixed income approach, we can say yes. And I want to just add to make a comment about John's reference to the state and federal dollars that are invested in this. At the end of the day, those are your tax dollars. And Berkshire Housing understands that responsibility, and we will steward this project into the future. We'll be managing it, the residents living in the property, and we take that stewardship seriously. A home is much more than 4 walls and a roof. A home is hope. Berkshire Housing is honored to be co-developing and managing what will be 56 beautiful homes in this lovely town of Lee. We look forward to the day when we can welcome new residents, because we know, as do you, home matters. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Patty Carlino, who's chair of the Lee Select Board. As I said before, over the years, not only the Select Board, but every board and commission we've dealt with in this town has been open and welcoming and has enabled us to get where we are today. Patty's the chairperson. I'd like to introduce her.
Thank you, Jeff, and I'm going to keep this short and sweet. And I'm going to come at it as a town, a community in a town, and how I feel about our community in our town. We're a small town under the steeple. We also lay claim to Arlo Guthrie's famous courtroom. In fact, I'm not sure what's bigger, this or that. But in addition to that, the people who live in Lee love Lee. I serve on the Board of Selectmen because I love Lee. I've served on almost every board in the town because I love Lee. And the people who do it now, that's why we're here. But we have to grow. And when this came up 9 years ago, we championed for it through town meeting because we knew we have to grow. And to me, I think this is a great value. I hope someday to be able to buy a pizza or ice cream next door. But it's exciting to watch, It's thrilling to know it's finally going to happen, and we all await those houses to come down, Jeff. And I thank everyone who came today. Thank everybody who helped us along the way. Thank all the officials, Smitty, Adam, everybody, Richie Neal. Thank you for all your help. And yes, and thank you to Bob Nason, who was a very big part of this and went through and fought for it right along. So that's all I have to say. I thank you all for coming. I'm sorry I had a bad call. Stay healthy.
Thanks, Patty. You know, normally you save the best for last. However, in this case, our cleanup hitter is on his way to being lieutenant governor. So I thought Senator Hines could speak not only from the perspective of our state senator, who has been, again, extraordinarily available throughout this process, but maybe he could speak a little bit for Senator Galvin, who I guess is still stuck in traffic, given your future position. So let me call on my friend, Adam Hines, to close this program.
Well, I usually try to draw a line between the political and the senatorial work. Thanks for blurring that, Jeff. Now, this is one of those projects that just it hits the sweet spot, right? We're constantly looking for where are we going to spend state dollars to make sure that we're developing our downtowns, we're developing housing so that more people are walking around our downtowns. We're kind of trying to address the transitions in our economy and some of the landmarks from the economy of the past and moving towards an economy of the future. And this just does every single one of those. So I'm so happy to make sure that we're celebrating with the town today and so many of you here to join this celebration. I have to say, maybe I am speaking on behalf of the Secretary because I want to underscore the importance of the historic tax credits. I'm the chair of revenue in the Senate, and I'm a member of the Tax Expenditure Review Commission. And as the congressman said, it may not be the most exciting topic, but it is where we literally try to say, we spend billions of dollars a year as a state in tax expenditures that don't undergo the same scrutiny that we do with our annual budgets. And just recently, we reviewed the historic tax credit. And it was one of the few where the Department of Revenue and a whole range of experts said, we strongly support the historic tax credit as a way to invigorate our downtowns and our economy, and this is worth every cent we can put towards it as a Commonwealth and in partnership with the federal government. And so I think and I can explain why in a couple of sentences. On the one hand, it's grant-like. You can monitor it, you know how much is going to be spent, and it's a group of experts who decide where it's going to go. So it's been a pleasure working with the secretary, with the former secretary, in trying to make sure that every penny that goes towards this project is worth our expenditures. And I have to say, to the congressman's point, and to the congressman himself, as Smitty pointed out, we're in the middle of a process of identifying how we're going to spend $3.6 billion in ARPA funds. And it's because of our congressman that we're doing that right now. I mean, it's an amazing opportunity that we have in this moment. So that'll be nearly $5 billion. That's on top of what we're putting into different other expenditure buckets and then what we're sending to some of our cities and towns. And then on top of that, to say we have $12.5 billion estimated at this point to come to Massachusetts for infrastructure. I mean, this is game-changing stuff. And so that's why it's an honor to be able to be a part of the conversations and how we're going to spend it and working with everyone to identify those key generational transformative projects. I can't be up here and talk about this project without talking about Jeff and how inspiring it is to say you have someone who actually puts his money where his mouth is, who is dogged and determined and persistent, and a project that takes this long to get off the ground. And on a weekly, monthly basis, Smitty and I are getting phone calls with Jeff giving an update and saying, here's what we need, and here's the strategy moving forward, and here's how you can help. And it's great to have someone where you can just say, great, that's what we're going to do, that's what we're going to put our shoulder into, and look, it's worked out. So thank you for everything that you've done in believing in Lee, believing in this project, and believing in the Berkshires. So thanks, everyone, and I can't wait to be back here as we're watching the reopening and as Pat said, buying a little bit from the market. So thanks, everyone.
Well, I want to be sure to thank again Congressman Neal, Secretary Keneally, Adam and Smitty for being here today, for all of you for coming. As I said, if it weren't for each of you, we wouldn't be here, but we are, and we are making progress. So the important things, there are caramel apples at every chair. Take as many as you'd like. There are pumpkins and flowers and straw bales and corn husks throughout. What I'd like to ask, and bottles of water, I'd like to ask, Patty, you're included in this, those of us who are sitting up front here, to come up to the excavator. We'll cut a ribbon, we'll put some shovels in the ground, we'll look like we're starting construction. We will be shortly, but at least we'll take some pictures. Again, thanks for coming. Enjoy your day.